Revelation 3706. From the 7th of March 1946. Origin of thought. You receive your knowledge from the spiritual kingdom. If you understand this idea, you also have faith and therefore accept a mental concept which is not of this world, which would either have to come from the kingdom of infinity or it originated in yourselves, if the former is not acceptable to you. And thus I want to explain to you how your own thoughts relate to the spiritual kingdom. Without knowledge you will find it difficult to give an inherent thought the right direction, that is, truthfully answer a question you raise yourself. You could certainly answer it yourselves, but without any guarantee of truth. And now I ask you where the thoughts which are passing through your brain come from in proportion to your understanding. Furthermore, I ask you who gave you the gift of thought and what, in principle, is a thought. You can certainly reply that it is a physical function, an inherent human characteristic that need not have been given to the human being. Nevertheless, thinking in itself is something tremendous when you take a closer look at the process. It takes place without any observable activity. It is not evident to any other person, nor does it leave any noticeable consequences or results. It is a process which can take place anywhere and at any time without the means to be scrutinized by other people. Thus it could already be considered a spiritual process, in contrast to every other activity for which the human being requires his body in some form or other. Whatever the human being does, he will use a bodily organ to perform the function designated for this part of the body. And it will also always be noticeable. However, this does not apply to the human being's mind. This can work while the body is completely at rest, although the human being considers the seat of intelligence, the brain, as the organ which also exercises its function. But its function merely consists of receiving thought emanations when it is touched by them. But where is the origin of thought to be found, especially when it does not concern worldly perceptible but spiritual things, which cannot be grasped by the human being's senses? The human being occasionally experiences thoughts in a flash, although he had previously not intellectually concerned himself with them. And every answer to a self-posed question is also a suddenly emerging thought, which thus has to come from a reservoir, if the person believes that a thought originates in himself. This reservoir has to be somewhere within himself from which he draws the mental concepts during his intellectual activity. Consequently, one should also be able to empty and refill this thought container, if it is to be found inside the human being. Or it has to be recognized as being external to the human body. It has to be looked for in the spiritual kingdom, which transmits every thought into the human heart in order to be deliberately grasped from there and processed by the thinking organs. The human being's will to make use of the emanations touching him can fluctuate, and in proportion to this is the person's outwardly recognizable ability to explain things and be deemed knowledgeable. Whether and when the person accepts emanations which correspond to the truth will require further instruction, but that he receives these emanations from the spiritual kingdom is a fact and can, after some consideration, also become a conviction. Because something that is not physically perceptible cannot be created by human will, rather it exists as something that has always existed. It has its origin in the spiritual realm. Just as all spiritual substances are emanations of God's strength, which is accessible to the human being in proportion to his will. But thought is, in fact, the evidence that the human being is a carrier of spiritual essence and who, as an earthly constrained being, is able to make mental contact with the spiritual kingdom. He can lift himself in thought into this realm. He can detach himself from earth and mentally reside in spiritual spheres. And if he believes that such a stay in the spiritual kingdom is a figment of his own imagination, it should be explained that the human being cannot think of or imagine anything that does not exist. that everything he imagines also exists somewhere, and the thoughts are more or less a reflection of what the person is trying to ascertain by virtue of his will. Only, the images can be offered to him in a distorted way, but this is also caused by his will. However, the human brain is never the origin of thought. It is merely the device which has to receive mental concepts touching it from the spiritual realm if they are to become perceptible to the person. It is beyond doubt, even for the unbelieving person, that he has to receive wisdom first, that he cannot bring it forth from himself unless it is in him. But this requires a stronger faith, because then he also has to acknowledge the divinity in himself which rests dormant in him and which can also truthfully instruct him from within. However, in that case he will receive the same explanation, because then he is in direct contact with the spiritual realm, with me, with the Eternal Father Spirit, who will instruct him himself. And then he will know that all mental concepts are an emanation from me and that he will receive the absolute truth as soon as he has made contact with me, the provider of truth. Amen.